All right, time to get started. Okay, guys. So my name is Carlos Perez. I'm the lead research for the. Well, I'm the team lead for the research team. Is what I want to say. This is my first Twitch stream. So today we're going to be doing kind of like a questions and answers and AMA on Sysmon specifically. Just in case, I'm the author of the TrustedSec Sysmon Community Guide, and also I'm the lead trainer for our 2-day Sysmon class that we give here at TrustedSec. I've been blogging, writing, talking about Sysmon, I would say since version 1.0, since it came out. So I've gone through all of the pain so you guys don't have to. So let's get started. Cool. So let's look at some of the questions that we have so far. Is there any update change log for the new Sysmon version? I actually have to write that one. I do keep one here in the Sysmon community guide. If we go here into, let's see, I have a change log around here. Where is it? Sysmon change log. So I've been keeping a table, but it's a bit outdated. I do need to update this table with the latest version. And this is one of the things that typically gets a lot of people surprised when we talk about Sysmon, specifically in training classes, and also when we do consulting, is that people really do not know that Sysmon gets updated so frequently. Also, they're surprised by some of the bugs that Sysmon brings up. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that Sysmon is free and there's no support. You can have a premier contract and you can try to open a support ticket with Microsoft and they'll say no. So my recommendation is, since it gets updated so much, since there's a couple of bugs in it, do remember to test. Do remember to validate. In addition to that, if you want to learn about the latest versions of Sysmon and what are some of the changes, my recommendations go into the sysinternals blog itself. When you go into the sysinternals blog and you look, for example, let's see, last update was 622, so last month, and we go here, we can see that Sysmon got updated to improve performance on rule processing and fixes bugs that may truncate large subrule expressions. So here you can, in the blog itself, is where you can actually start looking at, and you can start seeing some of the bugs that are surprising. Have you seen any issues with 1321 and computers going into a complete unstable state, like 30 minutes to even load a desktop that becomes unresponsive, based on all of config but with minor tweaks? I have not seen it, but more than likely, my recommendation is check your rules. If you have a ton of contains, if you're looking for image loads and the rule is a bit open in terms that it will log a lot of stuff, specifically false positives, it may hamper the system, especially since it runs at range 0. Since I don't have the specific configuration that you have what specific events, that's all I can say. But elusive, if you want to tell me what are the specific types, we can go into those. Is there any need to have specific Windows event IDs enabled configured if you're running Sysmon? Or their Sysmon covers everything? Yes, you actually need to also use Windows event logs and events audit settings. Sysmon is just an enhancement. It's just something additional that allows you to be a bit more targeted, but still you do need the Windows advanced settings. For example, I like setting kernel object access audit rules in addition to process access for LSAS, so I have both. Why? Because an attacker may go in and disable Sysmon if I haven't done any hardening to it. If they become local admin on that box, it's very easy just for them to go into the registry key and just delete that, and Sysmon goes into default mode in terms of its rule set, so you're able to bypass that. They may disable the driver, but the advanced audit settings are a bit more harder to interact with and disable themselves. Also, I like setting registry audit rules into the Sysmon key. There's also other object access that is very useful specifically for when we're dealing with some of the Kerberos. Domain controllers, I like setting other object access so I can check specific paths in Active Directory for stuff. Sysmon doesn't cover everything when it comes to WMI, specifically temporary events, subscriptions. So one of the things that we can do is that we can have a process in memory. You can enable WMI temporary subscription. So I subscribe to a class being created, updated, or deleted. And then when something happens in that system, that will trigger. Well, Sysmon only covers permanent events, doesn't cover that. Another thing is that typically I like using malicious WMI providers. I'll create one, set it up in the box. So all of a sudden that malicious WMI provider is just sitting there for somebody to instantiate a class. And as far as my parameters, I can have shell code for it to run. And since it runs via WMI PRVSC, that will run as system on the box. Sysmon doesn't monitor for providers being added into the system. So it's good to have both. Sysmon is just kind of like an addition that you tack in to be more targeted into your regular Windows systems. Let's see, what specific Sysmon configurations do you suggest starting off with based on your experience with Sysmon? Have you encountered stability issues with the agent causing any issues? Yes, actually I've seen several issues come up. That's why I always mention test and validate. Specifically, since this is a side project for a couple of guys over there at Microsoft, and Mark is the leader of the project, it doesn't get tested that much. I've been in customers when they have been doing deployments where it has blue screen a bunch of machines because of the way that the driver was set up. I've seen cases where all of a sudden the way that when Sysmon loads, it creates several callbacks into the into the kernel itself and registers those. And they have been in the past some EDR products or AV products that see that as malicious and they go like, oh, no, let me turn that off. So yeah, you have to be careful. You have to test it. Either could be an issue with Sysmon itself, or it could be an issue with a third-party product on the machine. So yeah, do test, do validate. Also, I've seen people make the error. For example, I want to log every driver that is being loaded on the system. I want every module that is loaded into the system. I want to log all of that. Yeah, after a while, that gets gnarly. All of a sudden, you'll see quite a bit of an impact in terms of memory and CPU. After a couple of hours or probably days, all of a sudden, Sysmon's consuming 1 gig of memory. I've seen that happen before. There have been memory leaks in Sysmon, so typically I like testing a new version at least for a month on a couple of test systems, so I make sure that everything runs well with it before I actually update to the latest version of it. I understand that Sysmon is not supported by MS, so some may have the reluctance to use it since it's not. Yes, that's normal. There's going to be people that are going to be reluctant on it. I have to be honest. If you're going to use Sysmon, you should have one person dedicated to it, and you need to establish processes around it. Sysmon is not a fire and forget. Sysmon is something that it will give you a large amount of telemetry in terms of information about your systems that you cannot normally get by using your regular Windows auditing and event logs. And it has value. I know some people may be reluctant, but it does provide quite a large amount of value. In fact, many times when I've been brought over to help with the IR team in a case, I go like, oh man, if they had Sysmon deployed properly in this environment with a couple of rules, none of this would have happened. In fact, I think we've only had one single customer where we have done an IR that has had Sysmon installed. And it was more of a review in that case. But I do recommend that you establish processes specifically for testing. I do recommend that you don't have one single master rule for every system. my recommendation is that you tailor it for the different environments because you're going to be able to create exclusion rules. You're going to be where all of a sudden, for example, let's say MS Build. MS Build on the developers' machines, a lot of false positives. I can exclude it over there on the developers' machines if I want to. Logs tend to occupy a lot of space, and a couple of sims out there actually charge an arm and a leg for the storage. So that's why I typically like doing exclusion rules. I wish we could just log everything we want and collect everything and keep it there, but we cannot. But yeah, something to have there. I've heard that Sigma rules are created specifically using Sysmon events, but also mapped to Jira rules. Could you elaborate? Sigma rules actually cover all types of events. There are some that are going to be tailored for Sysmon because of the data that Sysmon actually provides. There are going to be others. There are going to be other events in the system. For example, I remember writing a Sigma rule specifically for tracking when Sysmon gets disabled on a system. If somebody's using the filter driver manager API interface, you're going to unload that driver. There's going to be a system event with ID 1 with the Sysmon driver name in it. Same thing for CrowdStrike, same thing for other EDRs. I typically set up alerts for System 1 events, and that is a Sigma rule that you can customize that is not specific to Sysmon that you can have in your environment. But Sigma covers all of those and also provides you with Jira rules. So Sigma is a very nice framework because you can write a rule that you can adapt to multiple environments. For us consultants, I really do recommend that it's something that we study on, and that when we're releasing, you're all of a sudden you code a offensive tool, and you're going to cover some of the IOCs that it covers, or you're covering a technique, and you want to provide those. After all, we're security professionals. Our job is to make our customers more secure. So we should be providing some of that data either publicly or to our customers as we do engagements. Sigma rules would be something nice if we do have the time to work on those and provide those, because then they can be adapted to whatever platform the user, our customers actually using. So you create different configs for endpoints and servers, or the same config at all. I create multiple configs even per department. For example, one of the things that I like to monitor is, let's say in a customer environment, I'm not gonna say their name, they decided that they're going to set their salespeople, I don't know why, but they decided to do it, that the password for the machine was not going to change instead of 30 days to 60 days. Now that is a known technique that people, when they create silver tickets, for the silver ticket to actually have a long life of use, because it's dependent on the machine's hash, what they're going to do is that they're going to disable the machine from updating that ticket so they can then get back in with their silver ticket. So you monitor that registry key to see if somebody is mocking up with those settings. So you may have one specific one for sales, one specific one for other users. Same for exclusion, same for execution. For example, there are going to be applications that your HR department is going to be using different from your developers, different from your IT admins. Your IT admins are going to be creating scripts. So all of a sudden, if you have a rule that it's looking for the creation of .bbs, .ps1, or anything like that, and alerting on it as something suspicious, you're going to be getting a lot of false positives from several users that you're not going to be getting from somewhere else. Also, application behavior may look suspicious in some machines that may not look suspicious in others. So you're going to have different exclusion rules also in your rule sets. So typically what I do is that most organizations actually map the way that they work into Active Directory OUs. For some reason, they kind of like match together. And typically what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll start grabbing one or two test systems for each one of the different OUs. I'll set up a rule that simply has a tag on it for collection for that specific group. And then I'll grab that data, and based off the data, I'll create my exclusions. I'll create my base rules out of that. So Sysmon is something that is not, it takes some time, is what I want to say, when you're creating your rules, because you have to tailor it specifically to your environment. It's not like as if I grab, for example, Swift's on security rule set, which is awesome, and I just go like, oh, let me grab this full rule set and deploy it full to my environment. No, that it is very general. I love the comments. I love all of the info, but I like using it as a base where I copy paste out of it and modify into individual compound rules. And I'll enhance some of those. She made it as generic as possible. So there are no compound rules. And I like having compound rules because they can be tighter in terms of what I'm able to detect. So I use that as a base, and then I'll go over into OLAP's modular, and I'll try to see if I can cover some of the gaps. I'll deploy those, and then I'll adapt that to the environment that I'm working on. So while testing new versions, I usually keep an eye on the MSQA page for response issues. Any other forums? As you mentioned, it's the forum. The forum's the best place to go. Another place where I have seen some really nice bug reports for Sysmon has been in the docs.microsoft GitHub page. People were actually open GitHub issues on the repo for the sysinternals documentation on problems they're having with Sysmon. That is another good place to look at for specific issues. So there's the sysinternals forum, which is a very nice place to look for. So if I go here and I go sysinternals forum, and it's now called Microsoft QA. So yeah, same place. So typically I'll go in here and I'll start looking specifically for Sysmon. That's kind of like Perez. The real ones. Sup, Carlos? Hey. So let me go and switch to here, see if we have any questions. What's the latest you're tracking with Sysmon for Linux? Well, I still don't have a beta of it. I haven't been fortunate enough to play with it so far. From what I've seen in terms of videos, demos, and information that some friends have actually provided on it, is that the rule sets in terms of having rule groups, compound rules, and operators for the different fields are the same. So that basic knowledge that you have is going to remain there. Now, specific rule types, they're going to be different because Linux behaves different from Windows. Same for some of the fields, they're going to be different. The other difference is that it's not going to be in the EVTX. It's going to actually be in syslog. That's something that we have to be aware of and something that we have to keep an eye on. Okay, so let's see. Or you're just ping Carlos in Twitter with your Sysmon questions. Yeah, any other questions, guys? Come on. Also, for those of you that don't know, I'm the author of the Visual Studio Code extension for Sysmon. Where's my mouse? Here it is. So if you go into the extension marketplace, I do have one specific one that I wrote for Sysmon to help you write all of your configuration rules. One of the main reasons is that it's case sensitive. It's XML, so it drives you to drinking. So I created an extension just to make my life simpler. So one of the things I can do is I can just go, I can do a new file. I can say, I can save it. And what I did is I created an extension for it called SCM. So I can do test.sysmon configuration, SMC, sorry. Sysmon configuration is there, and now I can do Sysmon config, and it creates a template. Allows me to select my schema type. I just do a tab. I can select my hashing algorithm that I want to use on it. And once I have this, I can then start creating my rule groups. I can use Control I and do rule group. I can create my rule group. I can call it process creation. I'll set it to an OR. And then I can do process create. And I can do my include or exclude. I can just start typing my different rule sets there. So it makes my life a lot simpler, and it allows me to have less errors when I'm working on it. So let's see. I'm going to create a rule basis pits and want to catch the command runs in CMS and PowerShell. So for pits, typically pits get reused. So pit is a very bad source of information when you're doing instant response initially. And let me go over what do I recommend on that. So if we go to the Sysmon community guide and we go into process events, what Sysmon does is that Sysmon actually uses GUIDs. Sysmon will create that GUID by grabbing that process ID at the time, machine GUID and that timestamp, and will recreate a single GUID that is unique to that process on that system during the lifetime of that process. What happens if all of a sudden I have a notepad and I close it and I open it again, close it, open it again? More than likely by the third, fourth, fifth time, it's going to have the same pit. So that means that if I'm doing regular Windows auditing, that means that I need to have process creation, process termination. So all of a sudden I have to go like, hey, for this specific logon ID, I need to track that logon ID, that there's a process for this pit. I need to track, given my time window where it happened, when was the process created, and when was the process terminated, and that will give me a time window to then request all of the different actions that may have happened. With Sysmon, they simplify that. They give you a specific GUID for that process. So it makes your life a lot simpler. What are your favorite event types? All depends. I've been doing videos in our YouTube channel on some of them. I think one of my favorite ones, YouTube TrustedSec. So if we go here into TrustedSec YouTube channel, my wife hates the voice that I use in these videos. Oh boy, does she hate them. But yeah. So one of my so one of my favorite ones, process tampering is not one of my favorites. My favorite is actually Network Connect is one of those. And one of the reasons that I really like Network Connect is because one of the actions that most red teamers are going to be taking when they land in a system is that they're going to be doing SOX proxy, and they're going to be doing lateral movement. And in this video, when I go here into Network Connect, I do cover a lot of that. Let me mute the audio there a bit. So when I go, I create kind of like an initial rule set for this ports that you see here. Port 22, 80, 43, 135, 445, 88 Cabros, LDAP queries, RDP, WinRAM, and you can add a couple of others depending, for example, in fact, Principal is already RPC. So one of the things that you can actually do is that you can just create a baseline for those in your systems. And what happens? Every ransomware crew out there, every pen tester, every red teamer, at some point or another, depending on the engagement, they may use SOX proxy to do lateral movement. When they do lateral movement, they need to execute stuff on the other systems. So we're going to be looking at RPC and SMB traffic. They're going to be doing enumeration, so that means they're going to be doing LDAP queries. So we're going to be seeing 389, 636. They're going to probably do some type of Kerberos attack. So we may see, depending on the technique, we're going to be seeing traffic 88. If we have a baseline of what is normal in our system, and we exclude that, and then we just have a rule that is going to log for all of those ports, and we mark that as possible lateral movement or possible SOX proxy use, we're going to be able to detect their actions. What am I doing? I'm hampering what tool sets can they use, and I'm hampering how fast can they move in that network. Because all of a sudden, SOX proxy, which is awesome, and they leverage that a lot, no longer in the table. Another one is I like monitoring for LSAS. Anybody accessing LSAS. And I think I did that video specifically when I covered PS Gumshoe. I covered some of the LSAS stuff that I typically recommend on this one, and how I go through that process of using the PS Gumshoe extension to build all of that stuff out. Was here or was in the Sysmon extension one, the one where I covered that. Have you ever seen an image or command line not getting excluded? The Sysmon config is updated with the exact text for the event, so syntax should be correct. Not being excluded, there was a bug on one of the, I think it was 13.1. I know it was when they introduced the new libxml. There was a bug in terms of parsing the rule sets, and all of a sudden you had a bunch of excludes that were not getting excluded. There was a bug on it that was supposed to get fixed on 13.20. So do check on that one. Do you know if any projects are on implementing community IDs with Sysmon? This would allow trying to seek logs to Sysmon logs, for example. Well, if we look at Olaf's project, he does add to some of his events. He will actually include MITRE framework references into those that will allow you to then filter on those on those rule names specifically. Now you have to be careful when you're setting rule names. I've seen a lot of people. What Sysmon does is that when you have a rule that triggers, Sysmon will actually reorder the rule as it appears in the schema. So they'll have a compound rule, and they'll set a rule name on one of the fields, and they put it on the top one thinking that that will apply to the others. But when you look at the schema, that field is the last one in order. So when it triggers, it will trigger and it will use a blank one. So typically what I do is I put, instead of the individual filters, I put my rule names inside of the rule itself. And then what I'll do is if I have a rule group, I can also put my name there, but I typically try to use compound rules and put name of on the compound rule itself, so it triggers. So that is something that you need to test when you're doing everything. You can actually just put there different tags, and it will make your life a lot simpler because you're just filtering in your sim for the rule name to allow you to find stuff easier there. For those common ports, it's statically skewed to 389, 636. Majority of lateral movement uses those ports. Yes, there's going to be a lot of lateral movement on some of those ports. When I say lateral movement, I mean actions that they need to take for lateral movement. Most of the time what we're seeing is that people are using RDP. That's one of the biggest sources. They're going to RDP into different boxes. And all of a sudden, if they're using SOX proxy and you see like, hey, why all of a sudden is Word connecting via RDP to this other box? This is not normal, and that may trigger. That is something that you need to be careful with. Like, hey, this is suspicious. This is not normal. Uh, Other cases, what you're going to be seeing is that they're going to be doing cabarros to gain tickets to then do the lateral movement action itself. So when I mention the sports, I'm covering what they're doing for discovery of the environment, so they can then take actions. And then you have WinRAM, WMI, SMB, which are going, and RDP, which are going to be the most typical ones that they're going to be using for executing that lateral movement. Do you have a favorite framework for generating attack data sets, Caldera, etc.? I actually do not. I know that my good friend Matt Graver works at Red Canary, and they have one over there. Caldera is actually open source. Both of them I've played with, and they're decent. Typically, I do recommend that you learn how to write your own rules and then adapt those, but they're good as a base for you to start working on. What new and recent feature are you most impressed with? To be honest, the latest, I would say one of the ones that made me happy was the delete one, not having to deal with saving stuff into the archive folder, because I then need to have a way to manage that archive folder and retrieve data from that archive folder. So that one was like, finally I have this one. The process tampering one, I got all excited until I tested it. It was easy to bypass for us. We did share some of our bypasses with Microsoft, and they're looking into that to improving it. If that one actually gets updated, it's going to be awesome. Same for create process thread. I would like to see a bit more on different other techniques for process injection on those. No, only for new features you use. It's always relevant to update schema versions. Only if you use the new versions, as Olaf mentioned. A lot of events from 0x3E7. Never got around it. Events from 0x3E3. No clue on that one. Since you have inside knowledge, Carlos, what upcoming feature are you hoping to be implemented next? I'm looking forward to the Linux version of it. Why? If you've ever dealt with Audit D, you know, Audit D, not fun. Not fun at all. Nope. So yeah, that's the one that I'm waiting for, the Linux version. Because believe it or not, for some reason you see environments that they have Windows all hardened up, all secure, all bottom up. And then you go to their Linux machines and boy, they don't look pretty. Specifically when they deploy stuff to the cloud, I've seen our guys at work get away with stuff in Linux stuff that they would have not been able to get away in Windows environments, secure Windows environments normally. Because people for some reason goes like, it's Linux, it's secure by default. We don't have to worry. We don't have to configure logging. We don't have to monitor for stuff. And and then we have a party in those systems. Do that with care, not always dimension technique. Olaf, your Splunk threat hunting app is great. Very cool. Destroys special user management and privileges in Linux. Yeah, we've been in cases where all of this sudden we've been in and we've looked at the Linux system and we go in for one specific actor, and then we see that there was a plethora of other actors already living in that system, and we were like, ooh. That's why it's important for you to do, if you're doing red teaming and pen testing, typically you don't have the time, but if you're doing red teaming, do have a process to do what we call cohabitation. That means that you're in that system with somebody else, that you check if there's somebody else in that system. Just some simple checks. I've seen that it is more common to cohabitate with somebody else on a Linux cloud system than it is on a local Windows system on a customer environment. It is more common to find that you're not alone in that box. Many times it's very easy. We just look at processes and we check usage and we see that the CPU is fairly used and we see a process and go like, what is this? And we see that it's a crypto miner and the binary for the crypto miner has almost the same date timestamp for the SSHD file, and then you go like, oh, backdoor SSHD, ooh, interesting. And you see some stuff specifically on Linux systems. From what I've seen, it's port scan. Do you also see commands such as ping nestat? You might see mmap being ran. They generally query the domain for group permissions the current user has access. So you'd see RDP connection being tampered. Yes, especially now since in Mimikatz, we can take a look at the RDP stuff that is happening in it. You can steal credentials from most of the clients out there that use RDP. You can also steal credentials on the target machine. You should be monitoring from process access, specifically for SVC host. And then you should have an inventory of your RDP clients in your environment and then have process access rules for those. And then you need to exclude all of the normal actors inside of Windows, which include Google Update. Google Update actually behaves like a malware in terms of logs of what you see. WMIPRVSC, Task Manager, and some others will also open those logs. But typically what I do when it comes to process access, I like creating compound rules for those, where I create a compound rule where I look like somebody accesses process. This is the process that I'm going to exclude from my list. This is the user that is running on, and this is the specific access mask. And then I'll exclude that, because one of the things that happens is that EDR products, they do have exclusion lists. And we do look at those, and we do leverage that, because all of a sudden they say, oh, these processes, they're okay for touching LSAS. Hey, if their command line matches this, it's okay. But now when you add to that mix the access mask, and you add to that mix the user that they need to be running under, now it's harder, because now has to be this process with this command line, with this process, with this access mask, and this other thing, so I'm able to bypass that Sysmon rule. So that exclusion rule is now almost impossible for me to bypass. So that's why I like compound rules, specifically when I do my exclusions when it comes to that. Do they usually query AD over TLS? Not always, but in some environments they do. Do they try plain text first and then move to TLS? Yes. I'm trying to figure out a set of common indicators that could automate from a passive network middle box tool. I would, in terms of network, I would say that you could get more bang for your buck from using ETW. If you use ETW on target machines and you're looking at the ETW information for queries, almost everybody makes the same mistake, like, hey, I'm going to find accounts for Kyber roasting. I'm going to look at service principal name equals asterisk. Nobody, nothing in Windows does a query for service principal name asterisk by default. And all of a sudden you go like, that's suspicious. That doesn't make sense. In fact, if you do that and you have Azure, what used to be Microsoft ATA, they keep changing that freaking name so much. They call it Defender something, they call it something else, and now it's Identity something. But that product, you install the agents on your domain controllers and brings all of the data. If you do a service principal name asterisk, it will find it, it will trigger on it, because nobody does that. Same thing if you see queries for specifically for domain admin, or and then as attackers we switch. So now what we do is that we, instead of doing domain admins, we look for ADM account equals 1, and we look for those. And even that's not normal, specifically for what process is executing that. So you match what processes normally do queries and what are their normal queries, and you create a baseline using ETW, and then you look for stuff that doesn't match there. Mm. Hey, if Sysmon actually implemented that, where I can have rules for LDAP queries, that would be cool. That would be awesome, actually. What do you tell people that states, I'm people that states, no clue on that one, what you mean by that. I'm paranoid, so I'm constantly running who, netstats, lspf. Yeah, and those will actually, depending on how you set up everything, you can filter those out. QA dot question A, no clue. If you accidentally have conflicting include exclude rules, what takes precedence? The exclude. Also, another one. Rules are not processed the way they look in the XML. When you look at the XML and Sysmon processes that, it orders everything per the schema. And then the different fields inside of that get reordered per the schema. And then they get processed. First the includes, then the excludes. So you need to be aware of that order, because if you have, because all of a sudden you think, oh no, this role's over here, this will pick it up, and then this one, and then I have a very open one over here. And they get reordered by the order of the fields inside of them, and they get processed in that order. You may have rules that never trigger, so do test. I have a friend that likes using Pester, which is a testing framework for PowerShell. So he creates specific Pester tests for specific rules. So with PowerShell, he does get win event, and he looks for the different rules, and then he'll apply different chunks and tests to validate every time he does all of that stuff. And I saw it, and we're like, oh, dude, you gotta open source that. And go like, no, too much work. And go like, damn, that would be so useful. So, but he uses Pester for doing all of his tests, and that works super well. Sorry, Carlos, it was, what do you tell people that states Linux is secure, use Linux? Everything's insecure. That's a hard one. Everybody has a bias. Everyone. We say, oh, no, I'm not biased. Yes, you are. We all are. So it is working around those biases, and it takes a bit of work. But typically I try to find out what is their motivation for saying it. Where do they come from? What is their experience? Have they tried it? And sometimes it depends, am I going to gain something by fighting them over it? Yes or no. If not, I let it be. If I can get something, I'll probably talk with them about it and try to see if I can change it. But I don't lose sleep over it if I'm not able to convince them that every system's unsecure. Why would you tell a customer that tells you, I don't need Sysmon, I have an EDR? Yeah, actually had that one last week. That's an interesting one. For example, one of the things that we've done at TrustedSec, specifically in the research team, we've been hired multiple times for customers that have multiple EDR products. And they give us a testing parameters that they want us to tell them which EDR covers what more. And many times, as part of research, we test EDR products when we get our hands on them to see what are their gaps, depending on the configuration. And one of the things is that all of them have gaps. Why? An EDR vendor, when he writes his software and he pushes that, he has to follow certain criteria. One of them is friction for the customer. And when they talk about friction, means how many false positives can this trigger that may cause problems? Or how open can I make this rule but still be useful that will apply to most customer environments or almost all. So I can reduce the amount of friction in terms of support cases or bad taste from the customer going like, oh, this is detecting BS. This is detecting this and that and that. So they're kind of lax in those rules. And that's where we go in. We go around it. And also, EDRs don't monitor everything. Rundle 32 is one of those things that all of a sudden triggers a bunch of false positives. And many times they have very lax rules around those. Process access rules, they have very lax rules around those because all of a sudden everybody for some reason wants to have telemetry on their client machines, and we have a bunch of processes are getting handles on other processes to get information, which looks very similar like when I list tokens. So they tend to go like, not logging that, not causing me those issues. So they're going to have lagoons, and they're going to have issues. We have been in environments where we run something that one EDR detects and the other don't, and it's running well for a couple of weeks, and then we make a mistake down the road, and then the customer goes back, and the EDR vendor goes back like, yeah, we detected this attack here, that happened here, and it happened this here, and they say, and this was the point of entry, because we've messed up down the road. Now that we're able to track all of that stuff, but hey, dude, I've been here for 2 weeks. Now you see me. Like, don't act like, hey, this was like, yeah, we caught him from the get-go. No, you caught me 2 weeks later because I made an error. So yeah, we've been able to bypass those. So we do have anecdotal evidence from our experience in events in customer environments where we have been able to bypass EDRs. We've been able to execute, and if they would have had, for example, better Windows auditing rules, Sysmon with very tight rule sets, in addition to the EDR data, we would have been caught. If they would have implemented attack surface reduction rules from Microsoft with Windows Defender, we would have been caught. So setting up all, remember, you control the battle space. And by controlling the battle space, you control two important things for us. You control what tools can we use inside of that battle space, because depending on how it's set up, we will switch different tools. And also you control the tempo, because according to the controls, means that we have to modify our tool set, we have to test, we have to validate, and now we have to go slower to be able to bypass all of that stuff. Also, I've seen environments with EDRs that the EDR works awesome, works great, it's properly configured, and then I don't know why the hell they decide, oh, these machines are critical, the servers, so we're going to block internet access for them. And all of that machine learning cloud thingy that the EDR is using that is awesome, it reduces detection rate by 30-40%. Just because they went like, nope, this machine cannot talk to the internet. Seen that also happen, so yeah. Any recommendations for optimizing configs? For example, condition is versus begin with versus contains. Is a shorter contains condition better than a large is condition? When it comes to contains tends to be a bit more, yeah, sorry about the noise. Gardner decided to come and start working right next to my window. Yay. So yeah, contains tends to be one of those that it is very useful. I like contains in terms that I put everything into one single small rule set that contains any of this, contains all of this, or does not contain all of that. So typically I'll use those, but I use it sparingly. I try to use more is when possible. I know that one can get on the lazy side of using contains, but I have not seen overuse of contains be so detrimenting that Sysmon will not work. So yeah, you can gain half a percentage there, but I'd rather the rule be more efficient. Rusty Mouse in the house. Hey, buddy. what is the classic organization or of companies that Sysmon management? Have they dedicated SOC engineer? Yes, almost everybody that I know of that works with Sysmon initially starts thinking that, hey, I'm gonna grab Swift's unsecurity rule set, I'm going to deploy it, or I'm gonna grab all of this stuff from Olaf and I'm going to deploy it and I'm going to be golden. And then they find out that those rules need maintenance, that those rule needs updates. Uh, and when stuff happens, having people to actually know how to write a rule set, like what happens with the printing nightmare one, that you're able to iterate and deploy stuff as quickly as possible, but have the people dedicated to it with experience and know-how becomes more important. So they learn that they need to invest in people to be able to leverage tools like Sysmon, which applies to any other tool that you may use out there. From what I've seen, IR previously is just plain text for the first box, patient 0. You see the commands, net local group. Yep, that is. I've seen that also. Very helpful. Thinking of adding a feature where I pull out the AD filters. It's in plain text, and then I can see if I can determine normal baseline typically occurs. Yes, you can actually do that via ETW. In fact, that is what Microsoft uses for their identity agent that they deploy from Azure. Actually, it leverages ETW also. JUP Sysmon will pull this data for you. You have to command line login enabled. Yep. Let's go over here. You deploy it. You maintain it. Yes. It needs maintain. And this is one of the things that really irks me. I have a friend for whom I've lost a bit of respect for. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but he's a manager at a big place, and he collects EDRs. We were talking, I know him for years, and he's doing all of this stuff, and all of a sudden, we were talking one day, and we're talking about EDRs, we're having coffee, and he goes like, no, I have this EDR, this EDR, this EDR, and I have this solution, this solution, this solution, this solution. They're like, damn, bro, you have the entire InfoSec top 5 catalog. You bought almost every solution from the top Gartner quadrant. Your guys must hate you. You must be sending them to training constantly. Oh, no. Typically, I don't send them to training. They're able to learn OJT on the job. And we're like, really? Yeah. They're on the up. And you have 1 or 2 dedicated people, for example, for EDRs and stuff. No. He does WAF, he does EDR, plus he does IR. But you're a big company, you have budget. Oh yeah, that's why I bought all of these tools. You can get more bang for your buck by training people to be able to leverage what it's already in the OS. And then you can find gaps that you can cover with tooling that you're not able with regular tools. But that's my opinion. That's the way I see it. Cool. Breach. Started off as a learning project, and now I'm the only maintainer of a big org trying to train up more SOC analysts. I can give you an idea. And this is something I started when I worked at Tenable. I started doing lunch and learns. I started spreading out the knowledge. You start doing lunch and learns, like, hey, do a briefing on this, document this stuff, and then when people go into vacation, you need to assign somebody else, and you're like, hey, you know what, dude? All this stuff's recorded. I'm going, so-and-so is going on vacation in a month. You need to watch all of these videos and stuff, and you start slowly social engineering others to also gain that knowledge. But since you are the retainer of that knowledge, you should spread it out as much as possible. So you don't become like with the Phoenix project, you have the Brent, the guy that knows everything and he goes on vacation and everything goes down. You don't want to be Brent. Any cool Sysmon project out there that you looked at? Sysmon Security and Olaf's are my top one. Then there's the Sigma rule sets, which are nice. They're good. Yeah, those are the ones that I typically like. All of those three. Not everybody has Splunk, but if you do have Splunk, Olaf has a very nice threat hunting project for Splunk. Then Cyber Warhawk, he works at Microsoft. He's doing, he used to work at SpectreOps, now at Microsoft, and he's doing the same thing that he did for Elk. Roberto, he's doing it for Sentinel. I'm hoping that as a Microsoft MVP, I'll be able to play more with Sentinel, but takes money to set up Sentinel. So I'm talking with some friends at Microsoft, see if I can get some extra credits in Azure to be able to work with Sentinel. But yeah, from what I've played with Sentinel, with spending like $100 a month, it's really good. I like it. Again, all depends on space, how many logs you send, how many queries, how much you use. How to manage Sysmon and its logs in an SMB? Okay, Sysmon, typically what I like doing is I like deploying it via GPO. I'll create a run one scheduled task to do the initial install, and then I'll have a script that then I can force via Active Directory, force them to, in modern versions of Windows, you can actually have all of your boxes apply a GPO immediately if you enable the proper ports in your firewall to the specific host that you're going to be running the update from. You can enable all of that in your environment. So typically I do it via GPO. So I push my rule sets as binary blobs in the registry, and I think I covered that in the guide. Let's see, it's Sysmon config, the community guide. Community guide, installing configuration, deployment script. Here's the script. I have a script, a sample script. It's loading all of the other stuff, so it's like, I should have gotten the PDF. So I have a small PowerShell script here that actually allows you to check for the version of the file that you're deploying, so you don't upgrade a version of Sysmon that is already updated. You can use WMI filters, but they tend to be a bit heavy depending on the environment and the classes that you use. So typically I just create a PowerShell script for doing that, and then I'll create another GPO specifically using the registry wizard to then push out a binary blob with the rule set to the different machines. In addition, and this is just basics. Now, if you want to take it further, my recommendation is to also enable auditing for Windows on that registry key. So only SVC hosts should be touching that registry key with the Sysmon service. Anything that is not, you trigger on it because somebody may be tampering with Sysmon. Same thing for the files, and then you go to the service key. And on the service key, you make sure that everything's only for system. Why? Because if I'm doing everything via GPO, it's going to be ran from SVC host. And SVC host is going to be running at system on that box. So nobody should be updating or mocking with rules by hand. And what I'm doing is I'm just hardening it and making it more difficult and adding detection layers for somebody trying to disable Sysmon. Very cool. It's just me, or the volume is really low? Oh, sorry about that. I had the guy with the leaf blower outside, and I brought my gain down. Yes, no problem with installation. It's simple, but no resources with follow news, write new rules, manage logs, lack of resources, and people, small company. Yes, and in that case yeah, that's a hard one. You always have that balancing act. My ears low. Okay, so too loud now. So yeah, when you're working with Sysmon, yeah, there's not much you can do there. You need to roll up your sleeves, deals with. There's no automatic way that somebody's constantly putting new rules out there. Well, there's the modular that you can subscribe to it and see what Olaf's putting, and you can add those, but he's not covering every single different attack out there. Then you have Sigma rules, which can give you some idea, and you can monitor that. Then you need to go into the Twitterverse and deal with all of the stuff that comes with it and monitor people talking and then write rules on those. But still, you need to write those rules, you need to deploy them, you need to test them. The best thing you can do is that, as possible, automate it. Like example of pester rules. In the case of PowerShell, which is a testing framework that you can write your own pester rules for it. But that means that you need to learn PowerShell, you need to learn pester itself to be able to write those rules. But at the end, it pays off. It's like any scripting language. You learn scripting just to make your life simpler. At the beginning, it's going to be hard, but then at the end, you're going like, oh God, I don't know where I was without scripting to be able to do this. Same thing for C# and stuff like that. Let's see. Okay, awesome. So any other any other questions, Guy, for before we close up? I'm in a way too many blue team hats. Learn on job situation you described. Thank you for the lunch and learn suggestions. Yes, too many people wear too many hats. That's sad. It happens. I know it's gonna sound cruel or dry, but I'm of the mindset of embracing the suck. If you talk with my coworkers, they'll tell you like, the kid in front of Carlos when he got baptized peed on the water with his luck. Like, I'll have these weirdest things happen to me, and they're gonna like, dude, you didn't get a break. But I learned to embrace the suck, and don't let it get to me. And then one of the things I learned is that I gotta play the game. It's a game. We all think it's technical. It's either the bite is on or the bite is off. There's a lot of gray, and we need to learn to play on the gray. In corporate environments, it's not a technical issue. Security. We all know what are the best practices. We know what we need to do. It's always a political issue when we need to build collateral with different other team leads, with the other people or the other managers, and we need to create justifications for our cases of what we want to do. It's just part of the game. So it's more of a political thing and takes time. That's typically when people ask me, I'm starting security, what should I learn? I go like, yeah, read Stream Ownership from Jocko Willink. The Man, the Mission, and Me is another book. And the other one is Team of Team by General Stanley McChrystal. And go like, they're not technical books on security. And go like, dude, security in a corporate environment, more than half of your job is going to be a political one to get stuff done. You need to build collateral and then cash in on that collateral to then get buy-in to do what you need to do, what you know that needs to be done, what the industry has already told everyone that you need to do. Because when you look at all of the security cases, what do we know is that, oh, they didn't have logging on. Oh, they didn't have egress filtering on. All of that stuff are best practices that everybody knows. And when you look deeper into the why, and you ask 6 levels of why, typically, as a baseline, you find out that almost everything was an ego battle or it was a political one, and you need to work around it. So soft skills pays dividends. Join us at Discord afterwards to hang out and chat with Carlos. Yes, sir. Gracias, Carlos. No hay problema. Great stuff. Thanks for the Sysmon adding for VS Code. It's sweet. Awesome. Lowell, this is the second TrustedSec stream this week where Jocko and McRaven have come up. Really? That means that my coworkers actually listen to me. I'm actually pushing that internally. Can I work with red team? Learn from you. I'm ready. Only need improve my English. We have open positions always, so you can check. Agradecido, señor. Un placer. We are fans of Jaco. Yep. But always, one thing I always recommend people is don't put others in pedestals. Like Stanley McChrystal is a flawed person. Jaco is a flawed person also. Everybody is flawed. Just don't take everything granted. Just analyze it and bring it into your own environment, just in case. And I know I mention it because one thing I learned is that every time you meet your heroes, you get disappointed because you put them at pedestal. And I do like Jaco. I do love the guy. This is my sign that I have on my wall for Jaco, where it is his quote about not having easy days and everything's practice and being ready for stuff. So yeah, cool. Great talk. Thank you for sharing. Thank you guys. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your time. I wish you all a good day, and we'll stay in touch in Discord now. Thanks.